What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and in the 200th episode of the Fighting Game Tutorial Series, we are going to be adding these trackers for the statistics on our player profile. So we set up the player profile in the previous episode, but now you see that we have matches played with an actual number, matches won with an actual number, highest win streak with an actual number, and then favorite character with an actual character name, and favorite stage with a stage name as well. So let's see what happens if we go and play a match now. If we can update this, everything was 0 in the default states. So if I go into versus, for example, now I go and I beat my opponent. You can see I've already gotten him really low. Here's the mutant being defeated. At this point, we can exit out to the main menu and you will see that the stats have been updated. So returning to the main menu, going into the profile, you'll see that I have 1 match played, 1 match won, highest win streak of 1. Favorite character is the mutant because that's the character that I played as, and favorite stage is the training room because that's the stage that I played on. Right now this doesn't save, but we have added saving features in the past in the series, so you could easily go ahead and add them. I'm going to have a unique episode on saving all the stats, all the achievements, and the match history all at once, so I'm going to wait until the profile is pretty much fully set up to add the saving in, but feel free to do it now if you are already familiar and comfortable with it. So, before we get started on the series, I want to give a huge thank you to the YouTube membership and Patreon members and supporters. You guys are awesome as always, and I'm so happy that you guys are enjoying the series. I hope you continue to, and I hope we can create great things with this game in the future. If you are interested in supporting the Patreon or becoming a member, feel free to click this link in the top right corner right here, where you can check out all the benefits that you will receive as a part of doing so. And also, if you'd like to get caught up in the series before you check out this episode, you can see everything we've done from our throws, attacks, hitbox system, all that good stuff. You can click this playlist right here in the top right corner. It'll bring you to every episode of the fighting game. If you don't care about that and you just care about player profiles, you don't need to watch the whole series to do that. I would recommend you watch the previous episode where we initially set up the player profile menu and the navigation to it so that you can follow along with this episode of player profiles. Let's go ahead and get started. So this is a code and blueprint tutorial series. We're going to start in the code today. We need to make variables for all the things we want to track. So I want to go to my base game instance.h. and I want to scroll down to my variables, and I want to make variables for everything that I want to track. We do our saving and loading in the base game instance because the base game instance is something that persists between levels, and so it's very useful for data like this. So this is a good place to keep track of all of your number of wins, number of matches played, current win streak and highest win streak, and all those good things. I'll go over all these individually, but I've added every single one of these variables. So everything that's highlighted right now. First up, we have integer num matches played, then integer num matches won, integer current win streak, integer highest win streak, integer num matches played as each character, so as mannequin, mutant, and vanguard, and integers num matches played on the stages, so training room V2, trail of the wise, and furnace. They are all U property of edit anywhere, blueprint read write with a category of profile. Making them edit anywhere in blueprint read write will allow us to access and alter them in the blueprints. We are going to want to do this for the widget, specifically when displaying the information, like on the player profile. The category of profile just allows us to know what to search for if we want to pull up all these variables. It's not required, it is just a categorizing thing. Go ahead and make all these. Again, you have your matches played, won, win streaks, played as each character, and played on each stage. If you want to track other things, go ahead and add them now. For this example, it's all going to be about those matches played and won and the character and stage we were on. Once we have those variables set up, we can go into the base game instance.cpp and go into the constructor where we set all the default values. I'm going to default everything to 0. So num matches played and matches won are 0. Current and highest win streak are 0. Num matches played as each character, all 0. Num matches played on each stage, all 0. Just as long as they have a default value so they have something to read from, the first time you load up the game, this is all going to be accurate. So that's perfectly reasonable to default them to these values. The next thing we want to do is determine when we want to increment these values. And the easiest point to do this would be in the fighter template game mode .cpp, because the fighter template game mode has functions for when a match ends and when we win a match. we can scroll down to the function we created many episodes ago called match1. In this function, we were determining if one of the characters won, if there was a valid winning character. And if there was, we were triggering the match win effects, which basically just slows down time and does some stuff with the HUD. And we were doing that for the winning character specifically. Then we were setting the match state to be eMatch state, : eMatch over. After that, we were calling base game instance save game. We also already have this if statement, if auto base game instance equals cast u base game instance the current game instance. Basically, can we cast the game instance in our project to this game instance type, and if we can, go into this if statement. At that point, we were updating the total currency that the player had. However, everything else inside of this function is going to be for today's episode. So everything I have highlighted here is new, and that's what we're adding to this function. So remember, this function is called match1, and it passes in the winning character. So there's one character that wins the match. In this example, and for our logic, I'm going to assume that if we're calling this function, that winning character should be equal to player 1 if we want to consider a match 1. Because player 1 is the owner of the character in the local game, and most likely the account that is signed in. First thing we want to do in match 1 is update the number of matches played. And as it says in this comment, increment the number of matches played regardless of the winner. This is important because this is the match 1 function, but we don't care who won. This is just the number of matches played. So as long as there was a winner, a match has been played and finished. We want to grab our base game instance, do the arrow operator, and say num matches played ++ to increment that value by 1. Now, for number of matches played as each specific character, we do need to know what character we were playing as, and there's a few different ways you can handle this. The way I'm going to track this is I'm going to determine who player 1 was playing as, because if this is a local scenario, player 1 is the signed-in account or the active account, so player 1's stats are being updated. Doesn't matter what side player 1 was on, doesn't matter what character or stage they chose, but player 1 is the active account, and they are the ones that have the stats we want to update. So I'm going to perform a switch statement on player 1's character class. And by doing this, we will be able to determine what character player 1 was playing as. To do this, we can say switch, and in parentheses, we can put player 1 and use the arrow operator, but we can't actually just grab the character class. If we do, it's not going to come up because the character class is private and we aren't able to access it from the game mode. So I'm going to stop the editor just so I can play around with this a little bit and show you in real time what we need to do. But I've made a function called getCharacterClass. This is just a getter or an accessor on the fighter template character that will allow us to obtain that value that is private. Let's go into our base character, our fighter template character.h. I'm going to scroll down to my functions, my getters, and my setters. I have them pretty low in this file. See, they're all the way at the bottom here. So they are public, even though the variable for character class is private. And we can confirm this. Character class. So here's my character class variable, which stores the mutant, the mannequin, whatever. They're under the protected privacy type. And that means only this class and children of this class, or friend classes, can access that value. But if we make a function that is public called getCharacterClass, and it returns eCharacterClass, we can just return that variable and get the value in a different class, such as our game mode. So like we've made getHealth, getMaxHealth, setHealth, and setSuperMeter, we just want to add a new one called getCharacterClass. And again, make sure it's eCharacterClass because we're going to return that to the game mode. Once you make this function the fighter template character, you can go into the fighter template character.cpp, scroll down to where those functions are, and I've got a ton of logic in here. Here we go. My other getters and setters are right here. I went right under it and put this one here. We want eCharacterClass, a fighter template character, : getCharacterClass. And here we are just going to return our character class variable. By doing this, we can access it in the game mode if we call this function. So now that this function has been made, let's go back into the fighter template game mode.cpp, go back into the switch statement, player 1, arrow operator, get character class. This is going to return the character that player 1 was playing as. Then in the switch statement, we can break it up into cases, so depending on what the function returned, we can do different logic. The first case is eCharacterClass : e underscore default. Default is quite literally our default character. In my case, it is the mannequin. That's my default character. So colon after this case. That's how you write a case in a switch statement. Then you write whatever logic you want to happen if this is the case that is taken. So if player 1 is the mannequin, we're going to go into this logic. And what we want to do is grab our base game instance and update the num matches played as mannequin. So num matches played as mannequin plus plus to add 1 to it. After that, we type break because we don't want to spill through to these other cases. We just want to exit out of the switch statement. We've already found the case we were in. If we didn't find this, it's going to skip right over that, and we're going to say, is the eCharacter class from this function equal to the mutant? And if it is, we want to use our base game instance and update our num matches played as mutant. Then we can break out of this one. And if both the mannequin and the mutant fail, I'm going to go to my last character, which is the Vanguard at the time being. And so we're going to check case eCharacterClass : e underscore Vanguard. And if this is true, then we go base game instance, num matches played as Vanguard, and increment that. Again, we call break to exit out of that once it is done. It's also good to have a default case in a switch statement, so if none of these are met, you can do standard logic. We don't have anything we have to do right now, so I just say default : and it just breaks out of it immediately. Now, stages are a little bit different. So I was showing here, you could do some logic to get the name of the level and the specific child stage you're on. We actually have a good way of handling this, but I'm going to do it live. So we're actually going to skip this for now, just for a few minutes. We will come back to it before we exit out of this function. So let's go on to the next part after the stages, and that is the winning player. Now, we have to determine if we've won the match or not. And again, I'm going to do this based off of player 1. If player 1 has won the match, since player 1 is the active profile. We are going to check to see if winning character equals player 1, because player 1 is just a fighter template character pointer. It's a reference to the character that player 1 is controlling. And the winning character that gets passed into this function is a fighter template character pointer. It's the character that had won the match. So if the character that won the match is equal to the character that player 1 is controlling, we can go into this if statement. This means that player 1 has won the match, so we want to use base game instance num matches 1 plus plus to increment the total number of matches 1. Additionally, we want to update our current win streak because we just won a match. So we want to say base game instance current win streak plus plus. This is our current win streak. On the profile, we display the highest win streak. So we have to see if it is worthy of updating the highest win streak value. And to do this, I've made a new function called update highest win streak. So if we go into our base game instance.h, scroll down to our functions, I have a new one called void update highest win streak. Simply enough, if we go into the base game instance.cpp and scroll down to this function, I've added it here. Void u base game instance : update highest win streak. We just check to see if the current win streak is greater than the highest win streak. If it is, the highest win streak equals the current win streak. Essentially, whenever we win a game, we determine if that is our new highest win streak, and if it is, update it. If it's not, do nothing. Now, going back to the fighter template game mode.cpp, we want to call this function that we just made. So we want to use base game instance arrow update highest win streak. This else statement means that the winning character was not equal to the character that player 1 was controlling, which likely means that they lost. It could also mean a draw. Either way, at this point, we can go ahead and set the current win streak back to 0. If you want to do specific logic for draws, like ignoring it, then that's perfectly fine. You can just add an else if and check the match state. But I think it's not truly a win if you draw, so we can set the current win streak back to 0 as long as the winning character is not the character that player 1 is controlling. This only resets our current win streak. It won't reset our highest win streak because our highest win streak should be kept forever unless the player resets their profile or their data gets deleted or something. as the highest win streak just represents the highest of all time. And like I said, the base game instance save game was already being called. We're not going to save this data out yet. We're going to wait until all the profile stuff is in and make an episode on saving all that data. So I'm not going to change anything with this right now. Now let's go back to what I was mentioning earlier about the stages, and we can actually fill out this logic. So let's go into the base game instance.h and scroll down to our variables. If you've been following the series, you will have this level to load variable, and it is the name of the level that we are going to load, and we implemented this during the level streaming episode. We can use this variable to determine what variable we need to increment, or basically what level we were playing on, as it does not change until we go to load the next level. So we load the Trail of the Wise, for example, we play our match on Trail of the Wise, and then if we go to load to another level, we will change the name. But up to that point, it is reliable for determining what stage we were just on. Now back in the game mode, let's do an if statement, and let's check to see what the level to load has as its value. So we want to grab our base game instance level to load, and we want to call a function dot compare. You can see in the list here, we're going to compare the value of level to load to a custom string. So compare, and in quotes we put the name that we want to compare against. I'm going to put training room for my first one because that is our first stage that we're tracking. Then inside this if statement, we can go ahead and add the base game instance, num matches played on training room, and increment that value. So plus plus. Now, else if it is not the training room, it could be one of our other stages that we have. So we want to check this same condition that we just checked, but with a different name, with specifically our training room v2. If this is the case, we want to do the same thing here. We want to grab our base game instance and increment our num matches played on training room v2. Then we have another else if, and this is for the Trail of the Wise. So same else if, but again, changing this string from training room to Trail of the Wise. Then we want to increment our base game instance num matches played on Trail of the Wise variable. And we only have one other stage, so we can just put it in this else statement and assume that if none of the other stages were found to be the level that we're loading, then instead it is the num matches played on Furnace that we need to increment. There's actually something else we have to do in here, but let's load up the editor and let's get our real names. None of my stages are actually called what I had put in those strings. So that's what I call them in the game, but we need the actual level name. So you can see my side scroller example map here. The name of this level is actually my training room. So I can go to it, right click on it, rename it, and copy the name, and then paste that in the quotes to actually find the proper level that we're loading. Additionally, you could just type it out, but you do have to make sure that the spaces are equivalent and everything. So if you just go into rename and then copy it, you can get the name exactly right every time. My level titled training room here is actually my training room v2. So I want to take its name and paste it in the string here for the training room v2 counter. Then we have Trail of the Wise. I have to go to a different folder. It is in the Fight Game folder from where I imported it. And it's going to be under Stages. And here's Trail of the Wise. So Trail of the Wise is the same thing that I put in the string. However, there are no spaces. So we're just going to put that in there. Of course, with the else statement, it doesn't really matter because it's not comparing a condition. But that would be my refinery stage that you see on the screen. Now, once we have all of these in here, we're going to need to go back into the code. And we're actually going to have to change one more thing. So now all the stage names are correct, but we have to finish our compare statement. The compare returns a value based on the result. So if the side scroller example map is equal to the level to load, it will actually return 0. And you can see that it says if this equal other. So if the strings are equal, then we will go ahead and write 0. It will return 0. And so we want to check to see if this result of compare equals 0. And if it does, we can assume that these strings are equal. We are playing on that map. At this point, we have successfully made the string comparison and the stage logic. We can go ahead and test this by putting breakpoints in each of these, and we'll go and play a match on Trail of the Wise. The project is open. I'm going to load up a level on Trail of the Wise, and we're going to complete that, and we're going to make sure that the profile reflects that and actually says that our favorite stage is Trail of the Wise. So here we are, moment of truth. I just defeated my opponent. You can see that the breakpoint was hit on the Trail of the Wise path, meaning that we were actually on the Trail of the Wise. Let's return to the main menu, and let's go to the profile. Whoops, not settings, profile. And you'll see the favorite stage is Trail of the Wise. So let's go back to the base game instance, .h one more time, and I've added two new functions, one for determining the favorite character and one for determining the favorite stage. So the first one is int determine favorite character, and essentially we're going to see who has the most games played, so what variable out of those three that we have for the characters is the highest. And depending on which one is the highest, we're going to say that is our favorite character. Basically, favorite in this case just means the character that has been played the most. It is an integer, not void, because we're returning the index of that value, so we know what character it was that was played the most. I'm making it uFunction blueprint callable, so we can call it in the widget and display it on the profile. I have the same deal going on for determine favorite stage. So I have my integer determine favorite stage. Again, it will return the index of the variable that has the highest number of matches played on it, and that will be your favorite stage. I'm going to go ahead and make this uFunction blueprint callable so we can access it in the player profile properly. Now once these two functions have been made, let's go into the base game instance.cpp and set these functions up. You have a few methods to handle this one. You could check which number is the highest by putting them all in an array and grabbing the maximum value. You could make structures of each of these and put the character class along with the number of matches played, determine what was the highest out of the integers, then return the character class assigned to that. Or you could do a simple greater than equal check like I'm doing here. Really, any of these ways are perfectly fine. If you have a lot of characters, say you have 30 characters, well, this if check might be quite large, and so you might not want to do it. With only 3 characters, this is perfectly reasonable. So we have integer, uBaseGame instance, determine favorite character. I'm checking to see if the num matches played as mannequin is greater than or equal to num matches played as mutant, and num matches played as mannequin is greater than or equal to num matches played as vanguard. If the number of matches played as the mannequin is greater than the mutant and greater than the vanguard, it's obvious that the mannequin is the favorite character, or at least the character that has been played the most. If the number of matches played as the mannequin is equal to the number of matches played as the mutant and or equal to the number of matches played as the vanguard, you could have a tie. Specifically, when we start the game up for the first time, they're all 0, so we have a tie between all 3 of the characters. I'm choosing to have the priority based on where the characters are in the character select screen. So I think of the mannequin as first, the mutant as second, the vanguard as third. So if there's a tie, I always take the lowest index. This is just one way of handling it, so feel free to change it around to your liking. Basically, if the number of matches played as the mannequin is at least equal to these 2 other variables or greater than those other variables, we return that value. So we return the mannequin by returning index 0. When we get into the profile, we will know what that means. We'll handle that logic and make sure the mannequin is chosen as the favorite character. Else, though, if the number of matches played as mannequin is less than the mutant or less than the vanguard, we'll go into this if statement and we'll check to see if the num matches played as mutant is greater than or equal to num matches played as mannequin, and num matches played as mutant is greater than or equal to num matches played as vanguard. This is really the same condition as the if statement above, just using the mutant as the value we're checking. If it's at least equal to the 2 other variables at this point, we know the mutant is the one that is the favorite or the most played, and so we want to return index 1, which will be the mutant in our player profile. You can follow this chain for as many characters as you have, then when you get to your last one, you can say else. If none of the other conditions were met before this, we can assume the last character is the favorite character, so we want to return the vanguard or return index 2. Now you can do this for the favorite stage as well. I set up integer uBaseGame instance determine favorite stage, and right now I was just returning the default stage, which is the training room. However, we can actually make this the same as we make the determine favorite character. So I can add an if statement here and check to see if num matches played on training room is greater than or equal to num matches played on training room v2 and num matches played on training room greater than or equal to num matches played on trail of wise and num matches played on training room greater than or equal to num matches played on furnace. Now see how this already becomes a pretty big if statement? That's why I'm saying you may need to make it a little bit more modular as you get more characters and stages. We can go down below this and go else if, and we want to check the num matches played on training room v2, and we want to follow this. So we want to make sure that we are greater than or equal to num matches played on training room, and num matches played on training room v2 is greater than or equal to num matches played on trail of wise, and num matches played on training room v2 is greater than or equal to num matches played on furnace. Okay, and then we can do brackets. We have another else if below it. Else if num matches played on trail of wise is greater than or equal to num matches played on training room, and num matches played on trail of wise greater than or equal to num matches played on training room v2, and num matches played on trail of wise greater than or equal to num matches played on furnace. Brackets. Then lastly we can do our else statement. And that's our final condition. So instead of just returning 0, we can actually set up this logic to return the proper value at the time. We're going to say index 0 is the training room. Let's do index 1 is training room v2. Index 2 is trail of the wise. And index 3 is going to be the furnace. And there we go. The favorite stage setup is already complete at this point. There we go. So determine favorite character and determine favorite stage are set up. At this point, we can now play the game, launch the editor again, and make sure that our player profile widget has the proper variables on it. Now the editor is back open. Let's go back into our player profile widget. And I'm going to bind the text for these 5 stats that we have here. That way it can read the data properly. So I'm going to click on each of them. For example, matches played, text, and I'm going to go to the content. So I originally just put in matches played here, but I can actually hit the plus bind to create a new binding. It will look like this. So bind plus create binding. And once you do that, it will automatically bring you into the graph. I have them all open right now, so let's go to that one. That would be the get matches played text. Might have some weird name like get matches played text underscore 0, but I just right click and renamed it to make it a little bit cleaner. Now, all of these bindings are going to be very similar, so this should be a pretty simple process. We are going to get our game instance reference and grab the value that we need that we set in the code and then display that to the screen. To do this, we need a game instance reference, and to do that, we want to go to our event graph. We had nothing in this logic prior, but now I want to use my event construct and fill out a few variables. So once the widget is created, this event will be called, and we want to get the current game instance, cast it to our game instance, and set a reference to it. So get game instance will return the current game instance. We want to cast that to the game instance that we were working on in code, base game instance. Then we want to drag off that and promote this to a variable that I've called game instance reference. So it's just a base game instance object reference, no default value, called game instance ref. Now I have this and I can use this in my bindings. Additionally, I want to call determine favorite character and store the value, and we should call determine favorite stage and store the value as well. So now that we have our game instance reference, we can call the functions in the game instance. So determine favorite character, which has a return value, and those are the integers that we were returning at the end of the function paths. And I'm going to drag off of that and promote that to a variable to make the favorite character index, which is just an integer that has a default value of 0, and it will track whatever determined favorite character returns. We only need to do this in event construct. We don't have to do it in the bindings because we aren't going to be changing this value while we're in the widget. If we open the widget, the values are going to stay the same until we exit out and play another match, at which point the widget will have to be opened again, so we'll have to run event construct again anyway. After this, let's also do the determine favorite stage, so drag off the game instance reference and do determine favorite stage. Do that, and I'll clean it up like that. And I'm going to drag off of this, promote it to a variable, and we're going to save this one as favorite character or favorite stage index. There we go. So that's what our event construct looks like. And also, if you're not able to find this event in your widget, you just type event construct and it'll come up. Now we have all the variables we need for the bindings, so let's go back to the get matches played text. The first thing we want to do is grab the game instance reference, and only if it's valid do we want to display anything for it. So I'm going to grab my game instance ref, right click on it, and convert it to a validated get. Then, only if it's valid, I want to go into the return node. Each of these bindings should have a return node by default with a text parameter, but you can also add a new one by typing add return node. Drag off of the game instance ref blue node here and search for the variable that you want. So num matches played. This is the overall number of matches played. Then what I really want to do is return an appended string, so matches played with the number. Instead of just saying matches played here, it should say matches played 0 or matches played 1. So I did string append to get this node. I put in the same text that I had on the screen, so matches played : and then for the append, the B part of the string, I put in the number of matches played. When you do this, it will automatically convert the integer to a string with this little node here. Also, you'll probably want to put a space at the end of the A part of the appended string. That way they're spaced out and not directly next to each other. Then you can bring this directly into the return value, and it will give you this toText string node to convert the string to text. And that's how I get the matches played text. Now, the other ones are pretty much the same until we get to favorite character and favorite stage. So matches 1, create a binding, go into it. You will get the get matches 1 text. It's essentially the exact same. We use our game instance reference. We grab our num matches 1 variable instead of num matches played. Then in the append, we write matches 1 instead of matches played and pass it into the return node. The highest win streak is also similar. So if we go to that one and bind it, we will get the get highest win streak text. We are getting our game instance reference, grabbing the highest win streak variable here, appending highest win streak and this value, and then returning it. The last two that we have to do are favorite character and favorite stage. So favorite character, create a binding, and we will get the get favorite character binding. This one is a little bit more unique because what we're going to do is use our favorite character index that we determined in the event construct and make that determine what is going to be said on this piece of text. Get favorite character text. I'm going to grab my favorite character index and I'm going to bring that into a switch statement. Switch on int. Now when I do this, I have as many pins as I want. I can press add pin to add more. And essentially whatever was in the code is how many we want to have in this binding. So if I go to basegameinstance.cpp and scroll down, we return 0, 1, and 2 for the determined favorite character. So this value should be 0, 1, or 2. I want to fill out all three of these and append the proper information. So for 0, that's my mannequin. I want to have a string that says favorite character, and we're going to append mannequin because it was index 0. We're going to pass that into the return. If favorite character index is 1, we want to do favorite character and append mutant. Then pass that into the return node. If it's 2, we want to have favorite character and append vanguard and pass that into the return node. The default here just means if this integer does not fit within these values, if you ever make that happen for any reason, I have it defaulting the mannequin anyway, so it does display a value regardless. And that's how you can make your get favorite character text. The last one we have to do is the get favorite stage text. So go to your favorite stage, get a binding for it. Here's my get favorite stage. Now I was doing this a little bit simpler when we started this episode, but let's clean this up now and make it actually work. I'm going to use my favorite stage index, get it, perform a switch statement on it, and we're going to need 0 through 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, because there are 4 stages right now that we're using. For the first one, we want to return training room, so I have my favorite stage, and I'm appending training room. I'm going to clean this up a little bit. Something like this. And now I just want to copy this and make it a little bit easier on myself to add extra stages. So if it's index 0, it's going to be the training room. If it's index 1, it's training room B2. If it is index 2, then it is going to be the trail of the Ys. And if it is index 3, it is going to be the furnace. And for the default, if it somehow does not fall within this range, let's pass it to the training room by default. And there you go. That's how you can set up your favorite stage text and all of your bindings on your player profile. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode and enjoyed updating your stats on your player profile. If you did, please subscribe. It does more for myself and the channel than anything else you can do, and I just really appreciate it. I also want to give a huge shout out again to my YouTube membership and Patreon members and supporters. You guys are amazing as always, and I really appreciate you. If you had any issues with this tutorial or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. I would be happy to help you out, and it is completely free. That's all I got, guys, so thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.